right, definers, welcome back to Sustainability Defined, where we are defining sustainability one concept and one bad joke at a time. Today, Jay, very special episode. I like to think that we've been married to the definers for a while, and maybe one day when we make that official, we can do it in a sustainable way. We'll learn from this episode because it's all about sustainable weddings.
That's right. Scott, I thought you were going to say that you and I have been married for going on 6 years, and I think it's been a very healthy relationship. But no, we've been married to our definers for almost as long. My goodness.
Yes. So, Jay, let's get into the outline. What will we be talking about in this episode?
All right. So we are going to start by asking, what are sustainable weddings? Then what is the environmental impact of weddings? How can definers make their own or their family and friends' weddings more sustainable? Who are leaders in the sustainable wedding space? How am I implementing sustainability into my wedding coming up? And then we will chat with our expert guest in this interview, Gina Lett-Shrewsberry, owner of Inspirations by Gina, a floral and event design studio.
Jay, I feel like we should have had like traditional wedding music instead of our normal stuff, or like the chiming of wedding bells. Maybe
Right.
Keaton can throw that in somewhere.
Okay, yes. I was about to say that would be our first sound effect ever, Scott, and I think that would be worthwhile.
We got the production budget, I think.
That's right. So, all right, Scott, start us off. What are sustainable weddings in the first place?
Well, I feel like it's one of those things that people, you know when you see it, right, Jay? I feel like I've been to weddings where I'm just like, okay, no way are we eating all this food. What's happening to it? Or here are some flimsy plates we're eating off of. This is all going into the garbage, right? So yeah, there's a lot to think of, but Jay, we made up a definition, so go ahead.
Right. So, Scott, to your point, sustainable weddings can be many things, but in this episode, we've defined them as, quote, implementing sustainable practices in the planning and execution of a wedding, right? So we made that one up. I think it's pretty good, right? But we did find some others online. So Merry Caribbean, which provides Caribbean destination wedding and honeymoon resources, defines sustainable weddings as one that is eco-friendly and conscious of the consumption of resources that would otherwise be used in the wedding. And then there's the appropriately titled website Wedding Bells, much like our new sound effect, that defines it as celebrations plan where the couple's goal is to try to lower their ecological footprint and lower the event's impact on the environment in whichever way they can.
So Jay, Marie Caribbean, I have to tell you that when I saw that, I added in here what that was because at first I was like, is Marie Caribbean a person? Because it reminded me of when we did sustainable apparel or something like that, where we had marine debris. Do you remember? And I thought it was someone's name. And you were like, no, of course it's not. Or Marina Debris?
It was Marina Debris. Oh, she is Debris. Is famous around these parts.
Oh my God. All right. So Marie Caribbean, not a person. But what is the environmental impact of weddings? So let's talk about that. And like we mentioned, there's a lot of things, I think, when people think about what could have the impact on weddings, like just getting to the freaking thing, that certainly has an impact. But then all the stuff you're using, the food you're using, the drinks you're using, and it can add up. So let's first talk waste. So the Green Bride Guide, this seems to be like the gospel of green weddings. And it's I think it was 08 or 09, Jay, so it's been around a little while. But in this book, it said the average wedding produces 400 pounds of garbage and 63 tons of CO2, and that's the equivalent of the CO2 emissions of like 4 people for an entire year, just this one event. And so back to that waste stat, a little quick math, you take that 400 pounds, you consider that there's about 2.5 million weddings per year in America. That means American weddings produce 1 billion pounds of trash in a typical year.
Right. And so, okay, 1 billion, a lot, right? But to put that into perspective further, New York City. Residents in New York City produce 24 million pounds of waste, which includes both garbage and recycling, per day. So each year, American weddings produce about 42 days worth of New York City waste. I think that's such a visual stat. I love it. So then, we ask, what are the main culprits of this immense amount of waste created from weddings? And Scott, you've alluded to quite a bit of them. The organization Sky Ocean Rescue found that plastic cups, water bottles, disposable decorations, gift bags, fake confetti, and wrapping from table favors were the main contributors to outgoing waste from weddings. So Scott, I think to me, it calls to mind all those, like photo booth pictures you see from weddings with like props and stuff that like reference that event. And it's like, okay, the photos are not great, but like these things are obviously going right into the trash as soon as it's done.
Right. Right, or at least the mom's basement or something. And I love fake what's real confetti? I don't even know. Is there a real confetti? Anyway.
Great question.
So waste, not the only contributor to a wedding's environmental impact. A big one is transportation. So according to Stanford Magazine, the average carbon footprint of a non-destination wedding is 56.15 tons, with 43 of those tons being used on transportation for guests. So what's 43 tons of CO2 emissions? Well, it's equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions from 97,000 miles driven by an average gasoline-powered passenger vehicle.
Right. And Scott, to clarify, that's for a non-destination wedding. Destination weddings tend to have fewer guests, and it depends on how far away the destination is. But that can really add to the transportation footprint of the wedding. Pretty intuitive, but definitely a big driver there. So talking about all these other impacts outside of just waste on weddings, venues and lodging are another one. They contribute 6% of total carbon emissions from weddings, or about 3.37 tons of carbon, which is equivalent to about 7,500 miles driven by an average gasoline-powered passenger vehicle. So really, lighting and air conditioning for a lot of these large indoor venues can truly add up.
And additionally, imported flowers, they require lots of energy to transport and refrigerate. Flowers, topic in and of itself, Jay, maybe we should talk about flowers at some point. But on top of pollutants and water use, flowers can generate serious carbon emissions because of that refrigeration and transport I was mentioning.
Right. And so we'll be talking with Gina coming up more about flowers. We're excited to get there, but
that's her thing.
Right. That is absolutely her thing. But quick example here, as was noted in an ideas.ted.com article with a title that I think, Scott, you and I would certainly applaud called, quote, "The environmental impact of cut flowers? Not so rosy."
No.
The article says that in 2018, Valentine's Day flowers grown in Colombia and flown to U.S. airports produced some 360,000 metric tons of CO2. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to 78,000 cars driven for an entire year.
Right. That's not miles driven. That's cars driven for 1 year, right? It's pretty intense. All right. So how can definers make their own or their family and friends' wedding more sustainable? All right. So we're going to go over a bunch of stuff. And hopefully some of what we're saying, some of what Gina says in the interview, you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that aspect. Or, you know, you're in the midst of planning a wedding. You say, well, I've thought about it, but I didn't think about it that way. So we hope this is useful, or some of it. Mm-hmm. And so the next section here, how can definers make their own or their family and friends' wedding more sustainable? We're all about solutions here at the podcast, right? So we want to go over some tips and tricks in a variety of areas, and hopefully that inspires you if you're planning a wedding, if you help others plan weddings. So with that, let's get to the first one, Jay, waste.
Bingo. So, Scott, when it comes to food waste, Stanford University students in an article on green weddings encourage reducing waste by serving food buffet style so people take only as much as they need. Consider giving away then uneaten food to shelters, or perhaps let guests take food home in recyclable or reusable containers.
Jay, are you that person? I bring like Tupperware sometimes to restaurants. I feel like, given this tip, if you see people at a wedding with Tupperware or something like that to take food home, don't shame them. I've been shamed. I'm like, I don't care. I'm a sustainability person. I'm going to do it.
Right. And Scott, okay, so here's quick aside. You and I, we both Skyped into a Kellogg Business School at the University of Chicago, their sustainability and energy club group not too long ago. They offered to send us some of their swag, and I was thinking, okay, maybe it's like a t-shirt or something.
Oh, yeah,
and it's a reusable plastic bag, right? So all of a sudden, you know, we can just stroll into these weddings with our Kellogg branded bags and make out with all kinds of tasty food.
Right. Did you guys go there? Oh, no. We just, talked to some students and got a bag.
Yeah. So it's basically the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So on top of giving away uneaten food to shelters, some event venues may compost the food, and you could, if they don't, organize a compost pickup or drop off. Quick shout out here to episode 6 on food waste and episode 9 on composting. Some real vintage tracks there, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Note, though, we talked, this is about buffets. We do want to note that other sources say that plated meals are actually the way to go, so that caterers know exactly how much food to prepare. So the jury's still a little bit out here, but Of course, on top of this food waste, selecting reusable or recyclable products for place settings can also reduce an event's landfill waste. Plastic dishware often has to be thrown away if it's contaminated with even partially eaten food.
Yeah, Jay, when you say the jury's a little out, I feel like we talked some stats around the carbon footprint of weddings. To be honest, those are a little outdated. I wish there was more recent stuff. I guess I'm also hoping us putting this episode out there stimulates some researcher to really do some stuff. That would be a great thing to compare and get some numbers around.
Yeah, and listeners, hey, if you listen to this episode and put something together, let us know. We'd love to share it.
For sure. Okay, so decor-related waste. You could consider using items from your own home to decorate the venue. You could also shop secondhand, Facebook Marketplace. There's a lot of stuff on there you can find, toppers, decorations, mirrors. And on top of that, once you get it, you use it, and then you can resell it or just give it away for free. So that's an option people can use. You can also just consider skipping wedding mementos or favors altogether, because you'll know, unfortunately, many of those will end up in the trash as much as you think people want to hold on to these things. So, reduce, reuse, recycle. The more you can reduce, the better.
There you go. Something else you can do, and this is something that Ann and I have done, we'll get into more of that in a little bit, but send digital invitations to save time, trees, and postage costs. So to give more context to the environmental impact of sending invitations, or any card really, a recent study revealed that sending one card produces about 140 grams of carbon dioxide. The US mails around 1.3 billion holiday cards a year, which is the same amount of CO2 emissions as charging 22 billion smartphones or 22,000 homes' energy use for 1 year.
So that's just holiday cards.
That's just holiday cards, right? And so, Scott, as Ann and I have thought about digital versus paper cards, and the trade-offs, we ultimately went digital. But we did find this fun fact that over the past 5 years, printed greeting card sales in the U.S. have dropped by nearly 13%, as digital invitations then provide an innovative way to save money, save the planet, save time. So I think that 13% drop in the last 5 years is something to take note of.
Yeah, but I also feel like the greeting cards have almost become a little bit more gimmicky to try to get people to buy it. Mm-hmm. Like I'm thinking there's more with batteries in them, and right? So they make noises. I know, but I'm sure the footprint of that is way more.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think so. Because all the ones that fold out and have more popping stuff that's just that much more colored paper, I hear you.
Totally. All right, so that was a whole bunch on waste. Let's get to another biggie that we talked about, transportation. So one is thinking about the transportation, not just of your guests, but of the food that's going to be served, right? So you could think about seasonal dishes, stuff that's from local farmers. And really, I mean, we're talking about the distance the food travels. But honestly, it's much more likely that a larger impact is going to come in what you decide to serve. So if you can reduce that meat, reduce things that are made in a water-intensive way, that's really going to help. Also, remember that 43 tons of CO2 emitted for guest transportation for a non-destination wedding we talked about? Well, one way to do this is you can keep your wedding local. You can also think about the venues nearby, or even just do it all in one venue. You could even, I know I've been to a wedding where it was more like a camping site where it wasn't intense, but it was cabins with bunk beds, and then everybody stayed on site. And honestly, it was more fun because then the after party of sorts was just in the cabin.
That's
so
fun.
Everybody's there and everybody's participating.
I love that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Okay, and then if you do have different venues associated with your wedding, offer a shuttle. Don't have everybody driving individual vehicles.
Love that. It's the little things.
Or encourage them to carpool.
Absolutely.
And then we want to give a shout out to a cool group we found called TerraPass, because they have a part of their website that allows people to buy carbon offsets for weddings. So you could use any legit carbon offset, right? But this website just makes it easy to think through the footprint of your wedding and then buy the offsets for it.
Okay, so we have talked waste, we've talked transportation. Let's talk venues real quick. One of the easiest ways to host a sustainable wedding is to find a venue that prides itself on reducing its carbon footprint, recycling wherever possible, and incorporating renewable energy sources. Junebug Weddings put together a list of questions to ask a potential venue to gauge what efforts they use to be more environmentally friendly. So, Scott, what do those look like?
I'm going to rattle these off here. So one is, do they offer recycling or composting bins on site, or do they suggest someone who can pick up those sort of materials? Do they offer rentals? What seasons would lower the wedding's carbon footprint if they have a thought there? Are there any local vendors or organizations they recommend connecting with? And do they incorporate sustainable operations or methods? For instance, do they buy offsets for their operations? Do they have solar-powered items that they use? Do they really think through seasonal options? Things like that.
Right. Okay. Let's touch on our next topic then, which is flowers. So, for flowers, consider buying local or feature potted plants instead of bouquets as table centerpieces so that they can be taken home and planted instead of being thrown away. I love that tip. It's so straightforward and it just makes all the sense. Then you have to ask, I think it's central, at least to our decisions talking about flowers. Well, are there any trade-offs between real and faux flowers for weddings? Well, from our research, a recent study found that for single use, fresh flowers are the greener floral option. From production to disposal, a faux flower bouquet that is used only once is responsible for about 2.5 times more greenhouse gas pollution. Because the emissions in manufacturing are so significant, the faux flowers must be reused multiple times, perhaps even by other couples for their weddings to break even. Additionally, fake flowers cannot be recycled, while real flowers can be composted and diverted from the landfill at the end of their use. A surprising 4% of flowers in the US are properly composted, so if you're leaning towards real flowers, look into how you can properly compost them after the event.
And some people might think that number is high. Some might say it's low. I don't know, just given the composting infrastructure in the U.S. But either way, that's not a good number.
That being said, if the fake flowers are used multiple times, it can have a lower impact than the fresh version. And there's companies out there that can help ensure that they get used more than once. For example, we found one company, Something Borrowed Blooms, that specializes in premium silk wedding flower collections, and its blooms are rented for a fraction of the cost of a traditional florist, saving couples over 70%, which is pretty substantial.
And they must make more money, I would think, right? They're just reusing the same product, maybe touching them up a bit. So, okay, and then we did find a number of cool flower companies out there that are thinking through sustainability. So if you do want to go the real flowers route, one company you should check out is the littleflowerpress.com. It makes pressed bouquets into beautiful works of framed art that you can hang on your wall. So then you get further use and enjoyment from them. And then if you like Toy Story, you can order flowers made of wood from solawoodflowers.com. Those are actually pretty cool. You should check them out. And I guess the Toy Story reference, Jay, you put in here because of Woody. I mean, the man's trying to feed me bad jokes.
There's a snake in my boot.
Oh, my God. What else does he say?
Oh, man. It's been too long.
Reach to the sky.
That's it.
Did he say that? Okay, good. Whew. All right. Now, we also found a group called Bloomerent. I love these names. They're so like Silicon Valley startup, combined things. We're cool. All right, Bloomerent, who picks up your flowers after your event and immediately reuses them in another event. So that's cool.
Awesome. Okay, quickly, let's talk attire. First off, the easiest way to guarantee no emissions with what you're wearing is to go to a wedding wearing nothing at all. That said, renting...
Which I imagine is what you'll be imagining everyone in the audience, Jay, when you're nervous up there.
Right, huh? Right. That said, for those listening to this episode that are coming to my wedding, please actually do wear clothes.
It's not clothes optional.
Right. Can you imagine getting a wedding invite and you're looking for it to say like black tie optional or whatever the thing is? It says clothing optional.
Maybe there's some destination weddings where there's a part of it where that's the case.
I guarantee there has to have been one wedding out there that was performed naked, but I don't think it'll be ours. So, okay, back to attire.
Bring us back. Yeah,
renting is always a great option for all things attire. Although tuxedos are traditionally rented for weddings, look into renting gowns, bridesmaid dresses, shoes, and accessories that may only be otherwise worn once. Or give a dress another life and look into buying vintage. Many local vintage stores carry one-of-a-kind wedding dresses and wedding attire.
All right, some other small tips. One is around the registry. You could create a registry to minimize chances of guests purchasing multiples of the same gift, which then you'd have to return or discard even. You can also opt for an experiential registry. You could say, hey, give me money for my honeymoon or this cooking subscription or some travel I want to do. And that eliminates the cost and environmental impact of shipping certain goods. And then you could even have on your registry asking people for used versions of specific items. And this one, Jay, was inspired because one of my friends was showing me their registry where they asked me, they're like, hey, is it weird if we ask for people's secondhand camping tents? Oh. And I was like, I don't think so. Like if they're in good shape. So yeah, that my friends are thinking about that.
Nice. Well, continuing, we can talk about makeup quickly. So prioritizing cruelty-free and zero-waste makeup is another great way to have an impact. Cruelty-free Kitty highlights over 900 makeup brands that can help you shop cruelty-free. In fact, in episode number 35, Sustainable Beauty and Personal Care Products, Scott, you and I dive a little bit deeper into this topic, so folks check that out if it's of interest. Mm-hmm. For send-offs, so the wedding's done, you're walking out, everyone's, praising you and celebrating you like you just shot the game-winning 3 in NBA playoffs. I don't know. You use flower petals from bouquets, dried leaves, or potpourri that won't harm the environment or create waste.
Or real confetti, right?
Right.
That's still on. I still want to know what that is. So please email us. Real confetti.
We need one of those stat guys, Scott. That's constantly looking up stuff and fact checking us. So we can find.
I'm pardon the interruption. What did they call that? Stat boy.
Oh, Stat Boy. Yeah. Who? Yeah. I think he hosts Around the Horn or something. He's got a name.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Tony Reale.
There he is. Also, speaking generally, weddings can be a great time to encourage and initiate interpersonal conversations about sustainability. You can take advantage of this time, even if it's for a small bit, and it can really make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, rings. So one option, you can go vintage, of course. You can also look for conflict-free rings or rings made of moissanite, which is a naturally occurring mineral created in a lab, so you don't have to worry about harming the earth. And the best part, moissanite stones look exactly like the real diamonds, and they cost a whole lot less.
Excellent. So, Scott, next section here, who are leaders in the sustainable wedding space? Well, Naturally Chic highlights the best eco-friendly wedding planners across North America. Let's dive into a few of these planners that stood out to us and discuss what sustainable services they offer for weddings. First, we have Joanne Weddings in Colorado, which rents serviceware items versus purchasing things that will just get thrown out. Joanne Weddings also chooses biodegradable products and even donates leftover flowers to the local senior center or hospital. Greater Good Events believes that there is an opportunity to leave every interaction better than before by integrating a set of sustainability and inclusion-focused best practices. They strive to act by their better than before mantra by sourcing vendors that align with their mission. We love that they work with local organizations and vendors to ensure any leftover food is brought to a food rescue.
And then Keen Events, in where else but Portland, Oregon, make it their mission to meet couples where they're at and incorporate sustainable practices such as integrating local, organic, and seasonal food into clients' menus. There's also the Green Wedding Alliance. It seems to be only focused on Chicago, but it is a community of about 40 environmentally and socially responsible event vendors. And there's also a Green Wedding Professional course. This seems to be what this group focuses on offering. And it teaches wedding professionals how to increase their bottom line while helping clients reduce their wedding's environmental impact. And Jay, we looked at the FAQ and they mentioned that their textbook for this course is a book we've already talked about, The Green Bride Guide.
The Gospel.
Yeah, how to create an earth-friendly wedding on any budget. So you can also just go and purchase this yourself. So that's an option.
Yes, awesome.
All right, now the fun stuff, Jay.
Here we go. All right, Scott, I believe we are now talking about how I am implementing sustainability into my wedding. Okay, well...
walk the walk here, Jay. What do we got?
Right.
What are you doing?
And first and foremost, definers who otherwise haven't found out, I don't know where we've shared this news, but it's out. Scott's officiating. Okay, so the one, the only Scott Breen is officiating Anna in my wedding. And so therefore, I mean, that has to have some kind of sustainability points endemic to it. But that aside... Right. So, I think Anne and I, it's funny. We talked to Gina about this coming up. To have a sustainable wedding, you don't have to nail it on every single front. I think it's just, weddings are so much about conversation and just kind of figuring out what options are best. And so, as we've kind of been thinking about our wedding and ways to implement sustainability, it's shaken out kind of the way I'm going to describe, not to mean by any stretch that this is like any kind of prescriptive means to do it. So it's very personal, but I think this is the way we have felt better about doing ours.
Sure.
So first thing, we sent digital invites. We opted not to send, paper save the dates and paper wedding invites. And I know like that got pushed back from my mother and my grandmother who were like, well, I want, a physical invite. And we thought, okay, that's fine. We can still make, like printed versions of what we send online. But for most people, we're just going to go digital. And I think that's been working out very well.
And I will say the digital version, it looked like it wasn't just, it looked like a designed card, right?
Right. We used, I'm sure Scott, you've seen this, and Definers, you too, like those paperless posts is what we did.
Right.
So it's it's got a good look to it. It's not like a blank Word document that's like Jay,
right.
Anna and Jay's wedding, June 3rd.
With different fonts.
Yeah,
like, no, it looked legit.
Margins just awful. No, sir. So we did digital invites. We chose a venue that is local to us. And I say to us because we still have a lot of family out of state, but we did want to choose something that was at least, close to our home. And we like this venue. I mean, we got engaged right across the street, but this venue requires that all of their events use purely reusable dishware. So there's no, plate waste or, plastic forks or whatever it might be that gets put into landfill, through any of their events.
Do they rent it to you or you have to go find your own?
They leave that open so you can find your own. Our caterer also adheres to, I think sustainability principles. They just bring their own dishware so that it's, reusable, and they just reuse it every event they go to. So it was nice for us not to have to kind of worry about that.
And what about silverware?
Silverware? Oh, Scott, I haven't even thought about silverware. Let's hope they bring it. If not, stay tuned. Stay tuned for a future episode. I haven't even thought about that yet. Okay.
And what about napkins? Is it linen or?
Yeah, I think we're going to be, and this will actually perfectly bring us to our next point here, which is this whole universe and resource of Facebook Marketplace. I mean, it can be Craigslist, it can be whatever, but this secondhand market for what's out there. So, I think we're going to look at linens through Facebook Marketplace, but we've already bought a number of things that have been previously used. And so we're feeling good about being able to give those a second life. So specifically, we've talked about flowers. Obviously, we have faux boutonnieres and then faux flower arrangements for the tables. And so, in my head, Scott, as you and I were doing the research for this episode, thanks also to Amelia, of course, you see that 2.5 times number in which you have to, use a fake plant about 2.5 times to get it to balance out. And I think we're about there. I can't guarantee how many other folks have used some of our other materials we're buying secondhand before us, but our intent is to use these flowers and then resell them and kind of keep that going. And I think there's actually a thriving marketplace for that. So in addition to the boutonnieres and flowers, we got our just kind of regular water glasses and champagne flutes also from Facebook Marketplace. And that was really cool. And I think I might touch on this briefly in the interview, but we got to just piggyback off of the work that this other visionary bride did. And she went out and thrifted all of these mismatched mugs and glasses and flutes that kind of create this very certain aesthetic that I think Anna and I really enjoy. And so she got all that secondhand. She assembled it and used it for her wedding. We're now able to just take all those really for barely more than we would have paid to rent this stuff, to use it ourselves and then sell it and just kind of keep those going. So that's been really fun too. So that was a bunch of Facebook Marketplace. We talked about transportation earlier, Scott. So folks for us are most likely going to be staying in Boulder. The wedding itself, the ceremony and the reception site, they're both in Lyons, which is about 20 minutes north. So we have some shuttles running between the two to minimize, individual car trips to the extent that we can. We mentioned the experiential registry, which Anna and I are also doing. We're going to South Africa, and so we're giving folks the opportunity to contribute to, for example, great white shark diving that we want to do when we're in
Nice.
South Africa. And then I love this. Anna, speaking of vintage dresses, she is tailoring and reusing her mom's old wedding dress for our rehearsal brunch. So that'll kind of be this really special reuse of what her mom wore, for Anna's wedding too. So I don't know. I mean, Scott, there's a lot. There is all kinds of stuff that goes into wedding planning, infinitely more than I would have thought going into it. But yeah, I guess the good news is that gives you opportunities to implement sustainability however and in whichever way is best for each couple out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just nice hearing you say this because I can hear you sound excited about
Yeah.
it, and I guess it could probably be a little wedding planning. I haven't done it, but just everyone I talk to is like, oh, every night I'm thinking about wedding planning and it's such a hassle and this and that. But it sounds like this was maybe, I don't want to ask you, like, was it somewhat fun to think through, well, how can we do this part or that part to be a bit more sustainable or reuse things? So I would hope that it not only reduces the impact of the wedding, but maybe thinking through sustainable weddings can add a bit of fun into the process.
I think so. And to be honest, like I need to give credit where credit's due. Anna spearheaded a lot of this stuff, especially the Facebook Marketplace stuff. But really, I think it's so easy, Scott, as I've experienced, to just kind of get swept up in the wedding industry. And, everything becomes very black and white and it's very sequential and procedural to the point of where it starts to feel a little impersonal. And so for us, I think recognizing that and then consciously layering in this element of sustainability and executing on it, it just makes it feel more like your own,
Yeah.
I think, which is just critical for your own wedding. So I'm very happy we've done it.
Well, I'm excited to see all this in action. So it's going to be a good time. But Jay, tell us about the guest.
Yes. Okay. And Scott, quick side note, all of our guests cannot be more excited for the master of ceremonies coming up. So you're going to have some fanfare in just a few short months.
No pressure. Great.
Okay, so enough about me. Let's transition now to our expert guest, Gina Lett-Shrewsberry. Gina is the owner of Inspirations by Gina, a full-service floral and event design studio based in California. Gina is a certified green wedding professional and creates, quote, couture floral experiences with an eco-friendly twist. Gina started her company in 2008 as a wedding planner and has gradually moved her area of specialization into the floral design space. Can't wait to chat with her.
Yeah, and Jay, I will say Gina's laugh, it's just that is as enjoyable as the insights she provides on wedding planning and flowers and such. I feel like if we need to pipe in some laughter, talking about sound effects in our episodes, we'll just copy and paste that in somewhere.
Could not agree more.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm. What's the final for those courses? Do they give you a bunch of random flowers and say, wow? Hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what my girlfriend tells me. So, uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard that advice before. Okay, so let's say, Gina, I love how you got into this. You know, you're kind of doing it anyway. Someone said take some courses. That's great. At what point did sustainability come into it? Where you said more explicitly on your website to your clients, like, "Hey, this is something you should consider. I can help you with it." When did that come into the mix? Mm, okay. Hmm. So it sounds like you sort of came to this epiphany on your own of like stuff that really gnawed at you and said, maybe I'll put it into how I approach my advice around weddings. But I guess I'm wondering, did people also proactively ask you, hey, can you help me with this? Or was it more you offered first and then people asked later, perhaps? Okay. Oh, who offers that? Okay. Mm. Oh my God. Sure. Mm. And do you have with your clients sort of your top five things that you advise them to do to make it a more sustainable event? Like, what are your key suggestions to them? And maybe I would wonder of those top five, are there any that you've been kind of surprised people don't do more? Yeah. It's just us, Gina. Don't worry. Mm. So it's not just where you get it from, but what season in which you're trying to get the flower. So that can, I hadn't thought about that. Okay. See, but at least you're making friends with the California tourism people.
To help.
Oh yeah, we did an episode on green burial. Yeah. Sure. Totally. Anything else that was surprising to you? Hmm. Or reusable something or another. Hmm. Hmm. Well, sounds like could be the next business. And then I want to ask about interest in this stuff generally from your clients, and then get into specific clients. And I know you can't don't name names or anything, but just stories of what people you've seen people do. So, first question, just quickly, did you notice an uptick in the amount of people? I know you said that you ask people to consider these things, but have you noticed clients saying, "Hey, I sought you out because I saw on your website you care about this stuff," or before you even get into it, people say, "Hey, I want to make sure that you're thinking about sustainability." Can you talk to us about the level, like what percent of your clients you can tell are actively interested in sorting this out? Wow. Hmm. 3 years. Okay. And then can you talk to us about any clients that just went above and beyond and just tell us what they did? Or you were even like, wow, you guys really did something that a lot of couples wouldn't do, but that's great. Mm, wow. Yeah. Hmm. That is my one goal for the wedding, yes. And also to step aside when they do their first kiss. That's my other goal. So I got to remember to do that. So, Gina, first of all, I just want to say I love that example of all the stuff that that one couple did. When you talked about how they encouraged camping, I don't know why, but my head went to like seeing someone on the clothesline, they've got their tux from like the night before or something. I love that image. But how much do you recommend couples communicate in advance and or at the event? Hey, we made this choice because of this. Hmm. Yeah, that seems wise to me. Yeah. Right. Seriously. Mm. Has it also impacted how you go about actually designing the flowers and advising on the events? Mm. Yeah. And I wonder, here you are, the vendor, having this stance and not working with certain clients if they can't align with it. I wonder for those planning sustainable weddings, if they almost need to think about their own equity and inclusion statement and make that clear to all the vendors and say, if you're not on the same page with me, you're out. uh, mm, sure. Well, with that, I think we want to go to our last question here, Gina. So let's say that I'm at Jay's wedding, which is going to happen, God willing, and I'll be around. Yeah, hopefully, if they don't kick me off after I screw things up. But let's say I'm talking with everybody, and I want to give some sort of fact about sustainable weddings at the cocktail hour or whatever Jay and Anna have planned as we hold on to our glasses that have been rented in this or been bought through Facebook Marketplace. What would be that one fact around sustainable weddings that I could talk about at the party that would surprise people? Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gina.
All right, Scott, every wedding ceremony, no matter how fantastic, no matter how much an officiant like a Scott Breen crushed it, must come to a close. So if we are calling our Sustainable Weddings episode a ceremony, it's time to wind it down and move to our send-off.
Can't we just call this the after party? Go ahead. What are we doing in this after party?
All right, well, it's I guess more of a news bulletin than after party, but maybe we can just say we've got some champagne on the side. So listeners, definers, thanks for sticking with us this episode. A couple updates for you before we get into our thank yous and our reviews. Scott and I have been busy. We've been cranking this content out and we've had a blast doing it. That said, we're going to take a 3-month break from new episodes. So don't fret if you don't see any new episodes coming into your podcast player over the next several months. We're still at it. We're still grinding, and we'll be back later in the year with some hot, fresh new content.
Right. Stay subscribed. We're going to come back. Just like Jay's getting married. All right. Let the man get married without thinking about the podcast. Okay. All right.
All right. So quick news update. let's move on to our thank yous. We want to thank Amelia Kovach for her help with our research and our intro notes. We want to thank Keaton Butler for her audio editing magic that she helps with every episode. Also, we want to thank Square Peg Round Hole and Potions for the music we use throughout this episode.
Okay, and we also want to encourage everyone to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, particularly on Apple Podcasts, but wherever you get your podcasts. And Jay, I have not read this review, but you're telling me there's a really good one that was just posted.
This is a good one.
Is it a good one?
Yes, it is.
All right, so I'm going to read this for the first time while I read it out loud here. Okay, so this is March 9th, 2022. It's from Film User, okay? And it's titled, Your Brain Grows 3 Sizes, and then in parentheses, in a good way. All right, so here's the review. A cocktail of neurological delight. Recipe, 2 parts mind-tickling knowledge. 1 part effortless friendship, a dash of puns, and then in parentheses, heavy pour, and 4 drops of whoa. Combine and stir in a chilled glass of rock-solid research, serve with a slice of inspiring expertise, and then parentheses, or lemon. So that's the recipe. And then the review continues. If you are looking for an accessible entry into sustainability and eager to find a podcast that delivers truly fascinating knowledge on subjects far and wide, episode after episode, then Scott and Jay are your guides. Cheers. Film User.
How about that?
I love the creativity.
Yeah, it's the sentiment and the creativity. I mean, I think this one's an all-timer for me.
All right. Well, I feel like I say these on most of the reviews, and I'm like, you got to email us. Like, Film User, you got to email us. Let us know it was you, and so we can thank you directly. But we'll also thank you right now. So this was very kind of you, and we hope others will do the same. We'll keep reading one of these each episode. And I think that about does it for this episode, Jay. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
And I'm Jay Siegel. We will see you next time.